Hello, welcome to Networking Field Day 14. You are about to watch a presentation from Kentik that includes a group of invited social media influencer delegates who are here to ask questions, make comments, and offer their opinions about the technology of Kentik. If you'd like to learn more about this and other videos in the series, please go to our website at techfieldday.com or check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/techfieldday.
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about Kentik. We are a 4-year-old technology company. So when we talk to larger companies, we say we're 4 years old. We actually started in January of 2014, so we're entering our 4th year. And we founded the company to help our friends who run infrastructure with network analytics, mostly focusing on people that have ASs, people that run their own infrastructure, although we do deal with people that are more in virtual land. And the problem that we saw was that all of our friends, again, were complaining about their tools, specifically Arbor Networks, if you've ever seen that, appliance-based, roll-ups, aggregates, systems that took NetFlow, BGP, didn't connect to the rest of the world. Their peers and the DevOps and the developers and sysadmins couldn't understand what was actually happening. We take data from routers, switches, servers, hypervisors, starting with NetFlow, IPFix, SFlow. We take a very broad view, which I'll talk about, on what that means. Nginx logs don't have TCP flags, but they have lots of interesting performance data. Those can match well with NetFlow, and the goal is to be able to see what's going on the infrastructure. Traffic engineering, peering analytics, again, a big thing at the border of the network, DDoS mitigation, planning, even things like how much does a customer or an application cost me. Our customers are enterprise, about, I'd say, 40%, service provider, about 40%, and then we have interesting companies like Newstar, OpenDNS, people that run infrastructure, but in software that typically have an anycasted global network that are our customers also and need analytics to be able to plan and run their infrastructure. We come from the network world. I started the first ISP in Philadelphia back in 1992. Dan, our CTO back there, sold me my first T1 in 1994, helped me learn BGP. Does anyone remember Boardwatch magazine? We did some BGP articles for Boardwatch and stuff like that in the pay it forward. That was before you called it content marketing. It was just, let's help each other understand what the internet's doing. And we decided, I actually moved from Philadelphia to the Bay Area to start the company. We decided this was a large opportunity to sort of bring the networking analytics into the modern world. And so we are a venture-backed company based in San Francisco. So the thesis, what we see is network traffic analytics. So network analytics, people talk about that, network intelligence. We focus on the traffic. There's approaches that look at what should be and do policy modeling. That's not what we're doing. There's approaches that look at ping and trace route and active measurement. That's not what we're doing today. Where we start is, let's look at the actual traffic as close as we can get to it. 90% of the traffic we get is directly from routers or switches, sometimes through an encrypting proxy because we are primarily a cloud service. We run our own infrastructure in Equinix with MX104s and QFXs and by peering, by transit and do peering. And then we do on-premise deployments for people. As I'll talk about, it's not a VM, it's a cluster because we keep all the data at the resolution we get it. So when we do on-premise, it's a fairly large deployment. And the problem is that most of the tools that people are using don't scale. And the big data systems that people use to try to build their own don't really understand AS paths and communities and even prefixes sometimes, or IPv6, there's no data type for that. So people that need to build their own wind up spending lots of tools group time and still wind up not being feature complete. And the basic thing that we try to let people do is no, right? You hear a lot, is it the network? How can we not know? I'm sure, how many people are currently running an operational network versus consulting? So, or consulting for people are. I mean, you often are involved in trying to troubleshoot something, and then the problem's gone by the time you actually find it. So we try to deal with that and make it better. So again, is it the network with full resolution? And we really think that done well, and we don't think flow and BGP is the end-all be-all. There's metrics, there's logs, there's a lot of other things that you can get, and a lot of other interesting approaches like the policy and like active testing that you can use to convolve with this. That's on our roadmap. that it can be really useful for lots of areas of the business. Again, finance, capacity planning. How many people are or have been in sales? I'm CEO, so I get to raise my hand. So the dirty little secret, how many people have heard of the local pref nonsense that goes on between big providers on the internet? There are people that say, I will only peer with you if you local pref me up. If you local pref me over any of your other peers, so of course I can get paid to deliver the traffic. So as sad as it is to say, we enable service providers to say, who am I peering with? Who are the networks beyond that? Let me go try to make them an offer they can't refuse. Now I get to double charge, which is what, of course, that's the holy grail for big providers, is let me charge everybody in the world. So a lot of things you can do with analytics. We are turnkey, but open for integrations, rather than some people that have come into the space that all they do is custom work. So what most of our customers are looking at is open source. How many people have used NFDump or PM Account, or Silk is on the security side for how many people Solar Engines manage, Solar Winds Manage Engine, Plixer, sort of the older guard, Arbor Networks. That's so what we see is the open source stuff runs on one computer. People have done creative things to try to scale it, but you wind up needing to a lot of manipulation, and it's very difficult to store all the data. And when we do the demos, we'll show you why we think that's interesting. Arbor, there's Landcope on the security side, if everyone's used that view of flow. To me, this should all be one integrated system. Security, network performance, application performance. If you have the same set of data, it should be one thing that has it, that you can maybe look at a different type of nerd view for and different type of business view for, but they shouldn't be siloed systems.
So what you're saying there is you're using the same data sets that any number of other tools today would use?
That is a much simpler way of saying it,
right.
Yes.
So we're all, net flowing, p-capping, tapping, and we've all SNMPing, whatever it is. They're all the same data sources, but they're being distributed to a half a dozen different platforms in a typical good-sized install. That doesn't make sense. You should just have one platform to pull and get all the analytics in a single engine.
That's what we believe, yeah.
Yep.
And pull the SNMP once, since streaming telemetry is interesting, but not quite here yet. And and those whatever other tools you have should play well, right? So if it's pulled into one place, everyone should be able to integrate. Yep. And then how many people have done in their organizations internal big database projects for Flow? So the main challenge there is that these tools, as I said, they're not really very network savvy, and a lot of them are designed for ASCII logs, and they turn our beautiful binary formats into ASCII and then index it with Java, and are not very efficient. So, So what we've built is, as Greg was re-encapsulating me, is one platform that has multiple ways of getting at it. So the data comes in and it's not trapped. It's not, and you have a portal, which we'll show you. You have APIs that you can use. We have people that do their own fraud detection. We have people that do their own alerting because they have their own alerting system and they just want to use us as a backend. We have our own anomaly detection system, and all those run over the full resolution of the data, and people can pick and choose how they want to be able to interact with it. As I said, we're agnostic. Cisco's gone and done their tetration thing, which is UCS to monitor UCS. And they say NetFlow is evil, and so we'll only take data from 2 particular ASICs on Nexus and some servers. But what about the rest of the infrastructure? What about the WAN? What about the border of the network? In our view, we try to have a common data model, so you can search NetFlow v5, which has no IPv6, no VLAN, no MPLS tag, along with all the others. We just don't get fussy when there's columns that are missing. You could think of our back end, which we'll also talk about, as a big column store with a streaming alerting system. But where we can, we like to get performance data. So if it's Cisco AVC, or we have a host agent that will generate flow, but now with client latency, application latency, server latency, that you can then project and see how does that run over the network, what are the differences, which we'll also go in and demo. And as I mentioned, the big difference is we keep all the data. So yes, usually people are sending us samples because their devices can't do unsampled, but whatever the resolution that we get it at, we keep it. and then we may just make it fast to pull graphs and dashboards and alerting on top. But it means whenever you want to ask a what if question and drill down, it's there. A lot of the other flow systems, if you don't tell it in advance how you want to navigate the data, it won't have the data. In Arbor, this is called managed objects. You have to set that up in every way. And if you say, okay, memorize the top 10 countries for every customer, but then you want to see, well, what were the ports coming from that country? You can't because it's already thrown the data away. And we really think that the tool stack should be integrated and that multiple people should use it. So not just the network group. And as I was talking about with Greg, this is a little bit of a journey for us in that how do we take the network data and make it visible and understandable to the developers, the sysadmins, and other folks, so they don't need the tea leaves to be interpreted. Network folks know about how things are connected, but not everyone does. And that's a big focus for us working with our customers this year. We typically, most of our customers, 95% of them, send us flow to our own infrastructure, to our infrastructure. Cross connects in Equinix, because a lot of them run a backbone, or at least a disconnected backbone, but they've got tunnels and stuff internally. Directly over the internet, which we support and generally works well. And we have an encrypting proxy that turns it into, if you've heard of the Juniper protobuf, we use the next one, the Cap'n Proto, which the protobuf creator made, as just a binary format for, again, the superset of all the potential data we could get from network traffic metadata. So the platform is a big data backend, which we're going to talk about. So it's really running on Linux machines, running ZFS, with Postgres as an API, not really storing data, farming out subqueries to the back end. You could think of it like Redshift, but faster and more multi-tenant. The multi-tenant is what's really important and interesting in big data analytics, because with Drill, Druid, any of the Hadoop-based systems, Presto, any of the big data systems that we've seen short of Teradata, one forensic query that has to touch all the data can suck up all the IOPS on the entire cluster, and then you can't do your dashboards and your DDoS alerting and the things that people need programmatically or as humans going in. So we designed that in, thought that it was important. And we take data from, as I mentioned, many different kinds of devices. We're really agnostic. We have a library called Kflow for Kentik, which is this Cap'n Proto that people can use to send us their own telemetry as they, from applications, from CDNs, might have their own logs. And the goal is, where possible, let's figure out where stuff went. That's the basic 5-tuple. Network performance, application performance, and towards the client performance. Those are the 3 high-level things that we're really interested in getting.
And a quick question.
Yeah.
For the server, so you need an agent on a server to get off of it?
Well, it could have SFlow. I mean, if you have SFlow installed, we could take SFlow. But yes, we typically will need an agent on the server, the hypervisor.
And what kind of information are you pulling off the server?
So
about the operating system, or is it all about?
We're not doing metrics today. Now, the great Gartner ones in the sky say that to do this well, you have to do metrics. I think there are a lot of people that do metrics really, really well. We've integrated with Grafana so that our backend can be a native data source, again, for the DevOps crowd so they can correlate. In the future, we might do metrics, but today it's really just flow. So looking at packets. Now, the Inmon guys have done something very interesting with Linux BPF, which does not mean the same BPF that you might think for using traceroute, but it's kernel tracing, where you can do kernel packet sampling, but get the TCP info struct out, so you can actually pull out the performance info without having to do full reconstruction. So the host agents are getting more advanced, but you're still going to use some CPU. You still have to basically see packets and then turn it into flow. And whether it's a host or hypervisor or a sensor, we have some people that will copy all the packets into a tapped server and then run the same software to do that. And the main reason that it's useful to get on the host is, again, the routers and switches, very few of them can actually look at the performance. They can see where the traffic's going. I mean, in the sense of, is the port full? Yes, that's performance in some sense, but in the modern sense, no.
And is the agent constantly streaming data off, or can you sort of aggregate and send it in a...
No, it's constantly streaming. This is, I'd say, a feature and a limitation of our architecture today. things like VPC plugs, which are 5 to 10 minutes delayed, we haven't built an adapter for because the whole system is generally designed that data comes in and it's available in a second or two. Because DDoS is a big use case for us. So the batched approach, also it creates some UI challenges of how do I search, and then there's big holes for the first 5 or 10 minutes. We try to be very real time. So how we do it, as I mentioned, we are server-hugging infrastructure nerds. After I ran an ISP,
Can we quote you on that?
What?
Can we quote you on that?
You can absolutely quote me on that. We get into this a lot with people. I don't hate public cloud. I don't hate all the politicians, one of them, but not all of them that I don't vote for. It's our approach. It's much cheaper. I was interviewed for something one of our venture capitalists did that talked about not getting trapped in cloud jail. When you're a startup, just hire someone that knows about AS paths and prefix. And when you're spending $300,000 a month on always-on servers, or you eventually get to the point where you're like, look, my network doesn't work, and the big cloud gods in the sky say we don't care, run your own infrastructure. It's not that hard. Especially, I think Docker has come along. OpenStack didn't really do it, but Docker has made it a lot more tractable if you just have the little bit of network clue. So actually, who here remembers Usenet?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I think there's one MX80. Dan, it's just the one MX80 is all that's left of Read News, right?
Yes.
Okay, so only one, and we even moved out of the cage, so the Usenet pollution was gone.
And a Cisco, but I'm embarrassed to say that.
Well, that's in the CEO cabinet.
Right.
That's my VXR, filtering /24s. In the CEO cabinet, it's our demo of, we have some Usenet and VPN stuff that we use for
The CEO cabinet.
Yes.
And that's, in other words, you.
That's what it's called if you look at our budget, it's
Yeah,
the CEO cabinet. Because they don't let me touch the Junipers. And
Don't let you touch the production.
I'm a reboot in 10 kind of cowboy,
Yeah.
not a commit confirm. Commit confirm is for wusses.
Just to keep you away from the production.
Yeah.
network.
You can't imagine all the monitoring we have on the connection to that cabinet.
Very well instrumented. Yeah. So I was running infrastructure. We had stuff going when we started the company. We did it without VC money just to prove that people were interested in it. And again, Dan was at Penn Teledata covering both Allentown and Philly, and then at Netflix running their CDN operations. So we're all comfortable with it. The path we've chosen, we get very good access to capital, so we just run our own. It's all 1U 20-core boxes for ingest. We'll talk about our ingest layer. 2U 24 by 2 terabyte SSD with JBOD running ZFS on the back end, and very easy to buy. And we don't understand when people show ROIs that say you need 300 people to run that kind of infrastructure. So all the nodes Pixie. So we have really three kind of config management. So it's the nodes are stateless off of a master. We do use config management, but then we use Docker more as a portable runtime. So we have one Docker image that all the daemons run out of that same image, and if we roll it into upgrade, then we just restart a node. And it's our own backend. We're going to do a presentation just on the backend for people that are interested in how you munge all this data. And as I talked about, the data feeds in multiple ways. So the NOC, big use case, network architects doing planning, peering capacity. In marketing speak, we say the supply chain. A lot of web companies, we say, well, who do you need to work? And they go, oh, nothing. They'll say, what about Twilio? What about S3? Do you know what you're actually connecting to that if it doesn't Google Maps for your, even sometimes for the marketing page? That's a use case. We talked about sales, which is actually identifying opportunities, but also really with finance, whether you're an enterprise or if you're an enterprise, you really are a service provider, and if you're a service provider, you're really a service provider. So how much do things cost? You'd be amazed how many people, say, well, how much does that customer wants to renew, or I have this application, and how much does it cost us to run? And no one really knows. You just sort of have to eyeball it and guess based on SNMP and extrapolation. So our view is people should be able to figure that out. At a high level, I would say this slide was 6 months ago. We have about 100 customers. We keep We have many customers that send us each 1 billion flow records a day. We keep that for 90 days, sometimes longer, depending on what people want. We keep sort of resampled aggregates even longer than that. And it's designed so that people can sign up and test. In fact, if anyone is feeling adventurous and has a flow exporting device, you can go to kentik.com, sign up, send flow, and ask us really hard questions or criticize our UI while we're here. So I mentioned some of our big customers are web companies that need to run their infrastructure, and all their revenue goes over the network, is dependent on the network, like Box and OpenDNS. And some of them are service providers. They tend to be a little bit more sensitive about letting us publicly reference them, but we had 4 new global backbones sign in Q4, and that's a big hotbed of Arbor networks, who did a great job of 15 years ago scale, which was take a high volume NetFlow, build the aggregates, and we're trying to be a more modern version of that scale. So to end this segment, I will say if you want to start a free trial, get some cool analytics, perhaps get some cool swag, kentik.com/NFT14, and then we'll go into a demo.
Fantastic. I really like the fact that Kentik is one of the few companies who says we just keep all the data, right? Whereas normally, as you say, with the other platforms, your data comes in, they decide what data they keep, and then throw the rest of it away.
Right.
And when you go to replay or look for something, you've only got a certain number of data sources that you've got. So when you get into the situation that you don't know what you don't know, you can't go back and find out when you do know something or you learn something, like whatever, you can't go back and get information about history. History's gone and dead. So that's one of the things I like about your platform.
Thank you.
That particular part.
It's so fundamental, and we still sometimes in marketing, to people that have never used a computer on purpose, I mean, as a hobbyist or as a professional, it can be hard to describe how frustrating it is to sort of have a limited view. And you're Sherlocking, and you're sure that's where the thing is.
Yeah.
You can't actually confirm or deny. And
Yeah, with networking, we have no concept of temporal positioning. So we don't say, did this happen 3 months ago?
Right.
Because we never know.
Right.
So we kind of forget that we have no tooling to be able to say, has this been happening every month for the last 12 months?
Yeah.
Right? We don't, because A, we don't even have visibility into analytics tools
Right.
as a rule.
Yeah.
And B, even if we did, it's compressed telemetry, so we throw away 80% of the data because storing it in a Microsoft SQL database is pretty hard.
Yeah.
Duh, because it's in a Microsoft SQL server, right? And then thirdly, people can't store that much data. I think you must be doing some magic to compress the data down. And
Actually, we will be doing more magic, and Dan will talk about this. Today, we use ZFS compression.
Right.
So we do compression.
Oh,
but
you let the infrastructure do it.
we let the infinfrastructure do our work.
Wow, instead of hand coding some
It's
fancy software.
File System Function Virtualization, FSFV. New term,
Yeah.
blog coming.
Sure.
We'd get slightly better compression ratios if we inline the compression in our query engine. But part of the reason that people do column stores is because things compress protocol, right? Generally, you're only going to see a few of them. If you see we've seen DDoSes where you can see 255 protocols, but and so they compress better. And I would say, I think we're trying to do that for the network world. There are, well, how many people use RRD-based metric systems as their primary? We use it as a backup because OpenTSDB still gives us the fits. But there are some people are trying in the metrics world to be able to store everything also. But a lot of them, when you actually do store everything, then it slows down.
Yeah.
So I think it's a trend. I'm hopeful. But yeah, it's still emerging technology. Even in APM, people do sampling, and so we're working on that.